I want to thank you very much for coming down and being willing to go through this interview for us. The Historical Society was quite anxious to have you because of your role in education here in Colebrook for a number of years. So, this is our golden opportunity. As to the interview, this interview is being conducted on Tuesday, February 4th, 1997. The interviewee is Mr. Richard Irwin, and it's being held at the home of Mrs. Joan Walsh. Now, let's go back to first things first. Can you tell us where you were born and when?
I moved to Massachusetts in 1923.
What's the date in 1923?
October 22nd.
October 22nd, 1923. And tell us something about your parents. What did your father do for a living, for instance? Do you mind telling us that?
No. He worked for his father in a lumber yard. It was an Irwin lumber yard out of Woodford Corner in Portland in the old days.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked with him and went bankrupt in the Depression. So he went into the Customs Service.
In Maine. Was that in Maine?
Well, yes, but I mean, federal.
Mm-hmm. But he wound up working in Maine.
Oh, yes.
In that job.
Yeah.
Where in Maine did he work?
Well, all over the place. So they get transferred around. I don't know. They still do.
Yeah, they do.
We still started out in Van Buren, Maine. Then he got switched down to Southwest Harbor on the coast. And then back to Holton, Maine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Stayed in Holton, Maine for quite a few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this was when you were a young boy then?
Yeah.
And when you went to school there, did you go to school in Holton?
No,
You started school in Holton?
No, I didn't start school in Holton. I started school in Van Buren.
In Van Buren. Uh-huh. And how about your mother? She didn't work out of the home, did she, by any chance, or was she a homemaker?
She worked out of the home a little, but not enough to do any father.
Mm-hmm.
She had worked for a lawyer in Portland for years.
Mm-hmm.
And so she did typing work. I remember the first thing I remember was an old Colonel Hume from the Spanish-American War who in 1936 ran for Congress. And she worked for him during the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't make it.
But she had the experience of going through that work. Yeah. You've told me before, I know I've asked you, so I think maybe I'm right. Are you the only child of only children?
Yeah.
No,
my father had
half brothers and sisters, but your mother, no. Okay, tell us something about your education now. Where did you go? Where did you get your undergraduate degree?
University of Maine.
In Orono?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about your master's?
There too. That was all it was. They didn't have all these different branches.
Mm-hmm. So what did you get your master's in?
History.
In history. U.S. history?
No.
Just general, history in general? Mm-hmm. Then you also started a doctoral program, didn't you?
Yes, I did at the University of Pennsylvania.
And what would that have wound up as far as your dissertation was concerned?
That would have been on United States history.
Mm-hmm. Any particular period or just U.S. history in general?
Just U.S. history in general.
Mm-hmm. And you had some rather outstanding professors down there, didn't you? Didn't you mention a couple to me? Was Roy Nichols one?
Roy Nichols was there, yes.
Who else?
The one that was the one that served in the Kennedy administration. Eric Goldman.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
Destiny.
Yeah.
The Rendezvous with
Destiny, right.
And the Crucial Decade in Army.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You had him as a professor.
No, wait a minute. He was in for Johnson, wasn't he? Yes, I guess he was Johnson's resident historian.
He was? Uh-huh. I don't know. I can't argue that one with you.
Because Schlesinger was
Kennedy's. That's
Kennedy.
right. Yeah, that's right. You're right. Yeah. How about now? Did you served in the Army, didn't you, during the World War II?
We had Connor read that too. One we got the book on there and the tutors over there.
You had him at University of Pennsylvania. Did you, when you were going through the university and getting this dissertation done, or this doctorate, this education there, Did you think about going into education as a profession
Yeah.
at that time?
Yeah.
Did you know then that you wanted to teach?
Well, I was planning to teach on the college level at that time. But of course, it was a bad time because all the ones that come back that hadn't been in the army were all in there now as professors, you see.
Yeah.
But then this great flu coming back from the army too, so it was going to be a very competitive field.
So, getting back again now to your World War II service, before going into the army, did you have any jobs of any kind, or were you in school and then
I was in school. I had gone a year to university when I went to the
And how about your army service? Which branch of the you were in the army, but I mean, what rank were you? I should say.
Well, I ended up as a tech sergeant. Really, the staff sergeant. Only in those days they had a little problem. So they boosted you up a grade when they would let you out so you could get the higher.
Higher of the two rankings, or three rankings? Yeah. And as a sergeant. Yeah.
Three sergeants. Well, four sergeants. Four division sergeants. In those days, I guess it's still a sergeant, a staff sergeant, a tech sergeant, and a
master sergeant. Let's see. Oh, I know. Did you go overseas during your army time?
Yeah.
Where?
Well, we went to England.
Were you in any of those landings?
No.
No, but you went to England.
We went to England, stayed to England from June, then we went to France. We didn't go over to D+10.
Yeah, From England.
Yeah.
You went from England. Where in England were you? Do you remember where you?
Well, yes, Wantage was where we were most of the time, which is a little town about 10 miles from Oxford.
Wantage, did you say?
Wantage.
Wanthee? Yeah. 10 miles from Oxford. Okay.
I'm not sure about that, but it's not very far from Oxford.
Yeah. How long did you say you were in England before you went to France?
We got there in October, and we were there until June.
And then you went
to France.
Yeah. How long were you in France?
Well, we were in France until September, I think, and we crossed over into Belgium. We stayed in Belgium for the whole winter and spring.
So that was about a year or so, a little more than a year?
That would be from
September
to the next April, I think.
Oh, I see. More like 6 months.
Yeah, we moved into Germany, I think, in April or May. Somewhere.
And how long? Go ahead, finish.
The war was over. Let's see.
Okay.
In May, yeah, it must have been April we moved in there, because we were 3 or 4. The war was over May.
May 8th of 45.
Yeah, May 8th of 45. So we were there 4 or 5 weeks probably.
So it had been from, say, September of 44 to April of 45 that you were in Belgium. Yeah. Then you came back and you started on your PhD, because you had gotten your master's before you left? No, you hadn't.
No, I'd only gone a year.
Okay. So you finished that up first.
Finished that up first, and then I got my master's. And then, of course, for a very noble reason, but after I'd got my master's, I still had a year left of my GI time. For the reason I decided to
go on further. So that's when you went to Pennsylvania.
Yeah. You had the number of years you were in the Army plus 1. Only, of course, they counted a year, 12 months, and then you only used 9 months of that to go through a school year. So actually you had
almost a year left.
You had, you could really go 5 or 6 years on your GI.
Yeah. Okay, now, I remember you saying that your PhD study was interrupted when you decided to apply for high school teaching because you had to get certified. Am I right on that? In order to come in and teach in high school.
I had already got certified. At
the
University of Maine, I had taken 4 or 5 courses in education. Ridiculous, stupid courses.
Yeah. You had to take them. Yeah.
The only trouble is very few people seem to recognize just how stupid they were.
They don't even recognize it now, do
No,
they?
they don't even recognize it now.
Well, when you started teaching now, you didn't know. I'm getting mixed up here. Let me double back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When you didn't finish that doctorate, did you?
No.
Were you up to the point of writing your dissertation?
Yes, I was.
When you stopped and started to teach at the high school
I
level?
went there, and then I came back and taught in Groveton 2 years.
That was your first teaching job?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Taught in Groveton 2 years. Then I went down to Salem, New Hampshire to teach a year.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to West Bridgewater, Massachusetts to teach a year.
This was all in history now?
Yes, well, social studies.
Social studies. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course, it's in there too. You know, when you're new and taking on, you get stuck with the junk course.
That's right. That's right. Talk to Priscilla McGuire. She
Yeah.
could tell you that. Then where from West Bridgewater?
West Bridgewater, I got the job as principal over at Plainfield.
Now that's New Hampshire or Vermont? Vermont.
And that's
Okay.
what screwed me up, basically, because to take that job, I had to go the next one. I was intending to go back to the University of Pennsylvania that summer, but I had to take education courses to get certified as a principal.
And you decided that you'd like to go that route rather than further on in mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then you went, let's see, then from Plainfield, where did you go?
Yeah.
You came here from Plainfield.
Plainfield 5 years.
And you came here in 1960?
60, yeah.
Okay, as principal, as headmaster. And you were also, I remember, because I went over in, I think, in 1963 to start working there. And at that time, you were a teaching principal. And I think when I first went over there, you were teaching something like 5 classes a day and ran a couple of study halls.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but I taught 2 or 3 classes.
When I say
anyway,
2, I mentioned
study halls.
Yeah, when I mentioned the number of classes, I didn't mean different classes necessarily, but you had history, all 3 sections of
I had
history.
all 3 sections of history.
And I think you had business law when I was over there,
yes,
too.
I taught math, general math, too.
Yeah.
And I taught world history.
That's right, because I know my 2 older kids both had world history with you. Yeah. So that's right. And then you had that, I guess, did you have a first period study hall? I know you had a last period study hall. No, 4th period. You had 4th period study hall when we had 8 periods in the day.
I really don't remember exactly, though I did try to keep the first period free. So check on absences and things like that.
And usually, though, I think you had that last period, that 8th period as a study hall. Because I can remember.
Used to take the last period study hall.
Yeah. Because in those days, you just barely started the library section up. Before that, the books had been kept in the various classrooms. And I was in the study hall working. I think when I started, it was something like 2 periods a day. And I said to you, look, for the time wasted and whatnot, I might just as well give you a half a day. So that's what I did. But I remember you'd come down the hall and you'd cough or say something, and the kids would realize you were coming, and everything would quiet down. But that was quite a full day for you. But at the same time, you remember for your A group history kids, you would have outside reading, and you would go over there, 4 nights a week?
Yes, we used to keep it open 4 nights a
week. Yeah, and they'd be able to go over and do their outside reading if they wanted to. I mean, they could do it during study hall, but it was there for them. And then Friday afternoons, about 2 minutes past 3, off you went to Maine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I remember you saying that Eva Owen would, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, always come down and ask you a question just as you were ready to scoot out the door. But anyway, everybody survived that one. Now let's see, you taught as headmaster from 1960 through 1978, and you retired as headmaster, but continued to teach history, right, on a part-time basis?
On a part-time basis.
From what year to what year?
From 79.
79, yeah.
And I continued through 92.
through 92. Okay. Then you retired permanently, fully, and came back occasionally to substitute for a year or two. Can you remember anything that happened or things that happened in those years of being headmaster that stand out in your mind that you probably won't forget as you sit back and think of your years of teaching that you'd like to throw into this? Outstanding kids or unusual situations?
We had, of course, some outstanding kids, but it's kind of hard to pick anyone out, you know. In history, they don't stand out as much as I think an outstanding math student or something stands out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Outstanding science. I don't know if we ever had any outstanding history kids that ever went on to become anything in history. I've never heard if we did. Anyone who ever became any.
Because we've had a couple of kids that have gone on to law school that have mentioned your classes.
Oh, yeah.
You know. And
I don't remember though we had any college teaching
in social in history.
Any social studies we had heard of it.
Yeah. I don't know. How do you feel, while we're on the subject of able kids, about kids from rural areas like this? How would you compare them to kids from larger areas where supposedly, quotes unquote, they have more advantages?
Well, I'm not sure. As far as I can see, there isn't much distinction in the ability we're certainly not from one class to another. It's surprising, basically, really, how supposedly the intelligent parents in town don't necessarily have the most intelligent children.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be you can never tell where the intelligence is going to come from. Now, whether it's interest, it's not too easy to decide exactly what intelligence is. We have the IQ test over there. I don't even remember checking as to who our more intelligent children were over the years. I have no idea that over the 20 years I was there, or even afterwards, who the most intelligent child was we ever had. For one reason, you can't tell the tests. The tests are vary tremendously. They might take a test in the 8th grade and have 150 IQ and take it again as a sophomore and have only 130 IQ. And you don't know, you always can blame it on the teacher, perhaps, because a lot of our kids did much better in the elementary grades than they did in the high school. You always reckon that's probably because the teacher favored them or gave them a few hints, maybe, or something like that. But I think sometimes they did. Their achievement tended to be very high, too.
Because you still believe in the tests, though, don't you?
Oh, yes, I still believe in the tests.
As one part of a student's profile, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I think you're probably right. The genes come into play somewhere along the line. And some kids are late bloomers as opposed to others. And sometimes the late bloomers, once they build up some momentum, do quite well. And maybe they've had to work harder going through, didn't get it as quickly or as fast as the others.
Yeah, it's very confusing field. I'm not quite sure that all of you ever do pin down exactly what is going on. Except that if you, I don't know, I think if the kids are trained to work early, then they do tend to develop along the rational line. But the big problem is if they're not required to work and have discipline in the earlier grades, then it's almost hopeless for them to straighten out even when they get into high school. You see a child who may have great ability, who hasn't done anything through the years, he isn't going to ever amount to much academically. He may use that in practical life, he may get ahead and make a lot of money, but I don't think he's ever going to particularly shine intellectually.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I know you always said, at least in the years that I worked over there under you, that the kids that came down from St. Albert's had a certain advantage in that they knew how to study.
Yes, and
they were decently behaved.
Yes, and they were forced to obey the rules. This girl working over there now, this Esther Zito.
Now this is at Mrs. Noyes' house.
Switched her children to St. Albert's. She said one of her children made the statement that both St. Albert's and the regular public schools had about the same rules. The point was in St. Albans they had to obey them, and in the public schools no one obeyed them.
One of her children said
Yeah.
this. That's very interesting. Yeah. Coming from the kids. And I think the kids themselves know after a while. The ones that I've run up against now that have gotten older and are still here in town, or if they're not in town, will say, yes, we knew that when Mr. Irwin said something, he meant it. And they could go back on the teachers who did the same thing. And they know the ones that would let them slip by. It doesn't take them very long to come to that conclusion and to time that out.
No, when you substitute, you can pretty well tell the value of the teacher primarily if the child comes in with their lessons prepared, and the teacher's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you go into a class and you see what the teacher's assigned, and not a soul in the class has prepared their lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you look and some of them are getting A's and B's.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think that's a very good teacher.
Yeah.
Well, the administration might call that teacher a tremendous teacher, very often does.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, the test of it is in because I remember you would say sometimes when you did substitute, my God, those kids don't know a damn thing.
They're even supposed to know. I mean, they have a lesson and not even having looked at it.
Yeah.
Just reckon that's the way things normally go.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they didn't know there'd be a substitute, because if they knew there'd be a substitute, that'd be different. So when you go in and they don't know there's going to be a substitute, then you assume that they were intending to get away with knowing nothing for regular teaching.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right. Did you enjoy the substituting years? You did it for 2 years anyway, maybe 3.
For a couple of years I substituted fairly regularly. Well, yes, but in a way...
It must have been somewhat discouraging for you, too.
It is sort of discouraging. It was discouraging, especially the kids didn't seem to want to know anything. I mean,
Do you feel that kids nowadays, we'll say the high school level since that's what we're talking about, have the feeling that maybe, hey, I may not live that long. Why am I getting so excited about this? Why am I working so hard? Maybe I won't make it anyway?
I don't really know. I should think they'd be more inclined to think they'll live than they did perhaps 20 years ago. And, you reckon they may be all blown up by an atom bomb. No one thinks they're going to be blown up by an atom bomb now, I don't believe.
No, except that, now maybe this is true more of the city situations, but the violence that goes on. And we're beginning to see some of it in these more rural states now as well. Murders that happen. Violence that happens, kids bringing guns and knives to school.
So I don't really think that anybody over here.
No, I don't think we've had that problem.
Sort of thing at all.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that some kids are certainly turned off from education because education seems to be becoming more and more a mishmash of nothing and meaningless questions and so forth. I don't know. I mean, going over there to substitute sometimes, I noticed that oftentimes one or two of the kids who seem to show the most interest and listen the most intently and try to, recite, I'm doing well.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking primarily, I suppose I shouldn't get into personalities yet.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Is it Ziza, the locksmith out there?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, now I had substituted there once in the world history.
Mm-hmm.
And he seemed to be one of the most alert and intelligent children in the class.
Is that the older one? Yeah, I guess so.
I guess it would be
the one that writes
one.
sports.
And then I discovered he's barely passing. It was a question of his even graduating.
Is that
and that I can't understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't blame it necessarily also only on the kid. I think partly the way we're setting school up is sort of highlights mediocrity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the kid that stands out or is different in any way loses.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what is wrong with the whole system.
Yeah. I heard, this is, I guess, off the track a bit, but I heard just this morning when I was at the grocery store, the gal that was checking me out mentioned the fact that, now this is, I don't know whether it applies to high school as well as junior high, elementary school, but she said that, to get on the honor roll, if you get good grades, say in art, phys ed, music, and there was one other, you can make the honor roll. If you were to get 3 or 4 A's in those subjects, and the rest of it didn't balance off too well, you could still make the honor roll. Now, see, that didn't hold true years ago.
No, I didn't, and I know about that, and you keep hearing about it. But of course, you can't get very far when you consider that problem because they'll immediately say, "How who are you challenging that music isn't just as important as something else?"
Mm-hmm.
We even had the ridiculous situation over there. I don't know. We were having the board was listening to the principal there explaining about some kind of new approach to education, where we're going to stress the senses just as much. We claimed that we were emphasizing just speaking and hearing, rather than the other sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you get a weird picture of what in the devil. You'd have a kid go out to get a job who can say that he doesn't listen to anything and he can't understand any reading, but he smells well. So if he's going to get a job, I don't know what the devil they're talking about when he's ranting and raving about how the five senses, we got to develop them all equally.
Uh-huh.
So we got a kid in there who just happens to read well and listens attentively, but we don't pay attention to the fact that whether or not he can smell well, or whether or not he tastes well, and so forth. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of nonsense as far as I can see. And it's that kind of trap that is causing a lot of the troubles. Kids out of sense, no rhyme or reason behind the whole thing.
Now, this, of course, would have to carry up on into college, too, because some of these kids are getting into colleges from here.
Yeah.
And going along all right.
Yes,
apparently. So.
It's a lot of it is. And of course, they want more. I see the superintendent in one of his notices to the town that he hoped that the colleges would soon give up the lecture system of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So they can turn that into a bunch of nonsense, too, I suppose. And probably draw little figures all day or something like that and make little models.
To say nothing of the basics of some of the educational development on Western civilization and getting everybody into the act, the Afro-Americans, the Asiatics, and so on, But it's an interesting thing. Now, after you stopped substituting, what year was it that you ran for the school board? 94? Remember?
Yes.
94. So your term... Or was it 90?
94, because I'll be up in... No,
95.
95.
So your term is up in 98. Yeah. Did you find that was an eye-opener for you? If you don't mind my asking you frank questions.
Well, I suppose I shouldn't have been very surprised about it. But, I suppose it was an eye-opener.
Did you have the feeling when you went on to the board that you could really be effective in changing some of the policy?
I don't know if you did that, but I thought more or less, that basically, because logically, the administration has to go in the direction that they feel is right. And your job is to get a new administration if you don't feel that direction is right.
You mean the job of the school board members?
School board member, yes. I mean, the school board members can't really tell somebody to administer in a different fashion from what he believes is right. He isn't going to do it effectively anyway. Probably won't even do it at all. He'll twist it around somehow to get what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to see what direction he's going in. If you don't like that direction, get someone else.
Now, how does that process work? For instance, suppose the school board had decided that they wanted to replace any person that we had as superintendent. How do they go about doing that? Do they go directly to the people, or they have to review his application and his...
You can fire principals and superintendents fairly easily.
You can.
Compared to teachers.
Uh-huh.
But the trouble is it gets so involved and so many people don't want to fire someone and they want to delay, you don't feel like doing this or that. And of course, when it comes to the superintendent, you've got the rest of the district to consider too.
That's true.
They have to agree along and agree with you.
Does it have to be unanimous or a majority if something like that happens?
Majority.
1 over half. Yeah.
But it's not too easy to.
Yeah. And I remember you saying also that you found that you didn't get much support among some of the other members. You might have 1 or 2 that seemed to think along the lines that you thought.
Well, of course, it's not too easy if you are trying to reverse education. I mean, you go up against almost anybody, perhaps even you, and say, for example, you go to look at the school and say, I don't believe in the child-centered classroom. I don't believe in a democratic classroom. They immediately are against you on that, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't sound well. You're against the democratic classroom, which I certainly am.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound right. I'm against the child-centered classroom, which has caused almost all our trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't sound well. I mean, you go to the average person that's on the school board and they say, are you for a child-centered classroom? And they say, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things that you go along and you support don't sound too well.
Yeah. And you're the only one on that board right now who has any real background in education, who's actually ever fought it out in the classroom, except possibly when Earl Wadsworth was teaching, and he taught at the college level.
He isn't on there now.
No, but when he was there, yeah. Nobody else.
And there is a difference.
Mm-hmm.
That don't seem to make a bit of difference. I mean, you do notice that the board, more or less, if you come up with something and the superintendent says you're just all completely wrong, they're going to listen to the superintendent.
Yeah.
He's the local expert on it.
Yeah. One way or the other. Yeah. But people probably tend to do that. And then I was going to ask you what you thought of modern educational trends, but you pretty much told me.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you can think of? What do you see for the future if things go as they're going now?
Well, I don't know.
Besides
we're
chaos,
getting out of it in some way. I mean, we're going to this school to work program, and we're going to this thing of developing kids that will be trained for a job.
Well, how do you feel about I had asked you what you thought of modern educational trends and where things would end up.
This school to work idea, of course, started taking you back to the apprentice system.
Mm-hmm.
It may be all that would come out of this is of any value, because in a way, though, if you for it, you're admitting the whole concept of a liberal education for everyone in democracy goes out the window.
That's what would worry me.
You're sort of admitting a gigantic defeat.
But we had something like that at school. They had a school to work program in a sense, didn't they?
Oh, yes.
When the kids would go out in the afternoons.
But, we have been creeping in that direction, and in a way, it's probably sound. In preparing kids only for work, if you're not concerned about everyone needing some kind of a liberal education.
Now, I can't remember this, so maybe you can straighten me out on it. At that time, it wasn't the A group kids, the college prep kids that did that, was it? It was the B group or C group kids that went out. This program covers everyone?
Well, they wanted to, because that's tying with the current educational philosophy. It's supposed to cover everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's where you don't agree.
Well, no, I mean, that's completely ridiculous. I mean, we may not be able to educate everyone, and this is more or less claiming we can educate everyone, which to some degree probably we couldn't anyway. I mean, we did have a sort of a difficulty there. But we should have continued to educate those children with, who have either the will or the intelligence to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But we're sort of giving up on that too.
Yeah.
So I don't know where we'll end up on this.
Yeah. Is it in force over here right now? The school to work program? Not yet. Next year?
Well, it's supposed to be in operation next year, but somehow or other modern education seems to produce a lot of administrators that never get anything done. The idea is to plan for things until the thing dies out of just over its own weight, I guess. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
It should be in operation.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time they get all the committees and all the planning, I'm not
together.
sure.
So we've not started anything this school year.
Well, yes, there are some sent out to work. I believe the News and Sentinel, they have some and so forth.
Mm-hmm. But it's not been an overall program yet.
No, it's supposed to get into operation next year.
Yeah.
We have a federal grant now, and we'll get more federal grant.
So we're talking about the 97-98 school year.
It should be in operation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Anything else you'd like to say on the school scene before we switch to something else?
No, I guess not.
Have you been in any situation where you've been able to observe other schools that are going through what we're going through? As a school board member, are you people ever asked to go to another school or do anything in relation to not supervising, but evaluating other high schools or in other elementary schools?
Well, no, but we certainly, as a school board, have been urging the administration to do it. I mean, the principal and teachers. We have a program there, I believe, where teachers are released to go and serve other schools.
They do have a program. How many days are they allowed to do that?
I'm not sure.
You don't know how much time off they can have.
I'm thinking more in terms of the money that's appropriated for that substitute.
I remember years ago, I think we had 1 or 2 days, whether they were called observation days, I don't know, where we could go into another school situation and say, I would go. Now, to change the subject a bit, and get on to your years with Mrs. Noyes, you've lived with Mrs. Noyes, boarded with her, ever since you came to Colebrook?
Yes.
So that would be 36 or 7 years. Yeah. And if, when her time comes to pass on, what will you do then? Do you plan to stay in Colebrook, or have you thought seriously about it?
Yeah, I plan to go down to
back to Maine and stay there. Yeah. Which would certainly make sense. Can you winterize that cottage? Or is it winterized? No, it's not winterized now, is it?
No, yeah, I guess I can. There are certain problems with it there. I'll grant you.
But it could be done if
it could be done, but it's not too ideal a location for that. It's nice in summer, but it isn't in the winter.
Yeah. What would you do in those winter months? And would you find someplace else there in Maine or in Scarborough or around Higgins to stay in over the very cold months? Yeah. It seems hard to visualize the fact that you could very well be living someplace else because you seem like such a fixture over there on Monadnock Street. Tell us something about your cottage at Higgins. How long have you had that cottage?
1963.
Let's let it go. You've had the cottage since 1963. Had it been in your family before you took it over? No, you bought it. It was your thing right along.
We had a cottage there at the beach. That was the lower end. Different end of the other end.
But this is yours. Now, you've been there. When did you say you bought that?
1963.
1963. So you've always been able to rent it out during part of the summer to cover your immediate expenses, like the water and the sewer and the taxes and things. Have you had, except for the Marshes, any other families from Colebrook who have rented from you down there?
Well, yes. I mean, I have the Stone sisters.
That's right.
And the Webbers.
Webbers. They look like they're going to continue to go down, do they?
Yes, I believe so.
I know Sandy Stone and her family look forward to it every year.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Mrs. Weber, but I never have had. She did let me know a week or two before.
She goes. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And in addition to the cottage, you've got some hobbies. You did some painting for a while because I saw some of your seascapes.
Yeah, that didn't amount to much.
Well, they look kind of promising to me because I'm a rank amateur, but they looked good enough. Now, didn't you give a couple of paintings to Ellen and Freeman Colby in the years back?
Well, I did one on that trailer.
When they went into their trailer?
When the trailer burned.
Oh, when the trailer burned, yeah. How about other things? Now, I know you like to play the horses because I've given you money to put down for me. That's a pretty regular thing for you, isn't it? Yeah. And would you tell us about the places where you go to play the horses?
It's all just Scarborough.
Don't you go to Rockingham sometimes?
Well, on rare occasions. But that may be all going out the window. I don't know.
Rockingham.
All of them.
All of them. Okay.
They're all supposed to be just barely struggling by.
Yeah.
I saw on the television Yonkers, which is in New York.
Yeah.
Bankrupt.
Oh, they have. Now, is there anything else that you like to do when you're down there at the beach? I know you walk the beach.
Well, I collect coins and stamps.
And
done that for years.
The stamp collection. Now I remember that. Have you had that since you were a boy?
Off and on, yeah. I had it, and then for years didn't pay attention to it, and then I started. About 1970, I think I started.
Pick it up again. How about the coins?
Well, if you're collected by nature, you're bound to start to stick to some coins anyway.
Yeah.
A lot of people say with 2, 3 coins.
Yeah.
And there again, it's only been in the last 15 to 20 years I've really started
to save coins more seriously, where you go into the trading and is there anything else that I haven't thought of to ask you that you'd like to add to this? Because I think a lot of people are quite interested in what you have to say. I was glad that you made your comments on education and the school system and so on. Anything else in that area that you can think of?
Well, no, I suppose I should say something, but I can't think of anything that would be sensible. And that sometimes gives rather extreme opinions.
That's all right.
I don't know education. I don't think we've ever taken education very seriously in this country anyway, so if it falls apart, it's kind of hard to know.
Yeah.
But of course, up here, in this area here, we sort of lose out because, as I once said when I think I addressed the Honor Society, one of our great advantages up here is we have been restricted from having so much money to spend and waste on field trips and all the nonsense that so many city schools have. And therefore, we usually come out ahead. I think our kids have come out of here with a better work ethic as far as studying is concerned, which translates more or less directly over into their jobs. But our kids have got ahead.
Because there were fewer interruptions and diversions.
Yeah. But now, of course, we're all being pressed to get all these diversions up here. It's sort of to save our neck.
Whether that will be a good or a bad thing, it's can tell. Nobody can tell unless they have that underlying basic education. They're going to be up against it. Well, the same thing is true of the computers. We live in a computer age.
Yeah.
They're not going to go away. But as you've often said to me, they have a place, and there's a time and a place for them. Do you believe in them, in having them in the elementary complex at all? You don't.
I think they should be trained on the keyboard and things like that to use, but I think they should be very carefully used. I think they will certainly destroy a child's development of his thinking ability and things like that if you depend upon them too heavily. And apart from that, though, in the broader sense, I kind of worry about all this extra communications on computers.
The internet and the web.
Going to extremes, and I wonder if we are slighting the productive capacity of computers. We seem to be the thing that will determine the next century, not communication, but what degree we can use computers to increase productivity. So it seems though that you have a chance to bring about an increase in productivity, which could, of course, give the whole world a standard of living.
That's right.
But we seem to be so anxious to make money out of this sort of ridiculous extension of communications, and it's not really. It seems to me more important what you communicate than how fast you can communicate. We don't seem to pay attention to that though at all.
I think you've mentioned from time to time what areas you felt that computers would be the most helpful and useful in. Even at, say, the high school level, high school kids you aren't learning to use them, kids that are maybe going out into the business world. Elaborate on that a little bit, and the ones that are maybe going into college to work academically. How do you feel about the difference there? Do you think the computer has a future?
Well, of course, you're up against not only what it actually should be, but what it actually is. I mean, a lot of colleges are requiring computers now. I'm not quite sure whether that's wise or not, but if they're doing it, you can't very well go against the trend. You more or less got to send a kid out of here who has skills on computers.
I think that's pretty, well, we've got to face it. I'm afraid,
yes.
Whether we like it or not.
Whether it's doing more harm than good, we can't pay any attention to that either.
Yeah.
You still got to go along with it.
Yeah.
But I think people should be very careful about this business of computers, really, overstressing them.
Because they can take the place of, well, the normal student's ability to use books and use them efficiently.
I know there's 2 or 3 of these people who are computer experts because 2 or 3 of them have written books against it. And they had one Oriental on that, one of the big computer people, who said he only allows his children to use a computer 1 hour a week.
In what area did he say?
He didn't say what
Didn't
area.
say what area. Yeah.
So I think there is a definite danger that we're developing.
Too much and too heavy-handed a use of them. Yeah, to the point where they become detrimental rather than helpful. Yeah. But I just want to know, is there anything else that we'd like to cover that we haven't talked about here? Schools and kids. And I think, too, that speaking of education and instruction, we have to be a little bit sharper on the choice of teachers. Now, we've had some good teachers over the years, and we've had some poor ones. And I'm always afraid that because we are so far north, that we are apt to get the bottom of the barrel, somebody who can't get a job elsewhere, unless we hit on someone who loves the out of doors, likes the hunting, the fishing, the skiing, and all the sports and things. And we've seen that happen too. But in other ways, we're not always as fortunate. How do you feel about that?
Let's see, it would be about 37 years even afterwards, I deserve the teaching over that. I'd say, having taught in 4 or 5 other places, that we get probably as good a group of teachers as I've seen in any areas. I don't really see that as a great danger. I don't know why we avoid it or how we get around it. As far as I see, the teachers we've had over there, still have over there, are probably as good as any teachers that I've known anywhere else.
Now you're talking about both the elementary and the high school.
Well, no, I'm not about
mainly
the
about the high school.
I don't know the elementary teachers that well.
Yeah.
Though I noticed that in these last negotiations, I was impressed by 2 or 3 of the elementary teachers. They seem to know what they're doing and be alert. So I don't really see that as a great danger. Maybe more of a danger in the future. I don't know.
But right now, you feel that it's that's good to hear, because I think once in a while, I'll backtrack on that, because usually the ones that are poor don't stay. Either they leave of their own accord, or someone gets a hold of them and makes them see the light, more or less, that it's not for them. I think of a couple of instances just recently where these young teachers have stayed a couple of years and then it just wasn't working out. And I think for their own good, they left for whatever reason, whether they chose themselves or whether they just didn't have their contracts renewed.
Yeah. And of course, we now have the switch there that we have accomplished last year, that we can now get rid of first-year teachers, first and second-year teachers, without all the nonsense.
First and second-year teachers as well?
Yes.
Until they come into that third year, then? You still have that option.
We were tied up here with this. We had agreed to, the board had agreed to, with the teachers union, you see, of having this, that you couldn't let anyone go without proving their inefficiency. And we finally got that out.
Now, was that a statewide ruling?
No.
That was a local ruling.
Yes. And we finally got rid of that. Last year's contract. So that now we can.
You can do it at the end of the first year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we always used to do that anyway. Remember when I first came here, we always fired a teacher a year. I think the first 5 years I was here, we fired a teacher a year. Some years too.
Well, the fact that you can do it without any fuss and nonsense is a relief in a way, isn't it?
If they fire the right ones.
Yeah.
They don't always fire the right ones.
Yeah.
Very often they may fire one that is developing, because teachers, like so many other things, don't always develop completely at first,
Right.
I mean, a first-year teacher may show considerable potential, and yet the end result may not be too good for looking at the performance that 1 year.
And I think a lot depends on the principal in the school, whether that principal backs that teacher, whether that principal helps him or her in some way, recognizes their shortcomings, and tries to get them to work on them, provided the young teacher will take that advice. Sometimes they won't. That works too. But I think it's if we can keep going as we are and maybe combat some of the other areas that are not the best thing for the kids, hopefully, we can keep on turning out some good products. And I think we have turned out good products in the past. And the fact that we're as far north as we are and considered in the boonies, quotes unquote, doesn't mean that we don't have quality. And I think that that's good because you think of some of the kids that have gone out of here and what they've done. Granted, maybe the number is not too large, but the ones who have taken that step or have stayed here, started their own businesses, and have done well. That's a pat on the back for the school system, too, I think. Anything else you'd like to add to this
No, I think
interview?
that probably.
You think you've said all you want to say?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, leave it for now, and if I have any more questions, I'll probably come back to you, okay?
Okay.
I realized that I left some things out when you were here before, so this is now Wednesday, February 19th, and I'd like to pick up a couple of points before we close off. One thing that I should have thought of a long time ago was your gardening. Have you always gardened, even as a boy? Always vegetables?
Well, somehow I seem to be ending up just the way I started. Because as a kid, I used to go around house to house selling cauliflower and cabbage.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
I remember then we sold them for a nickel each.
Wow, yeah. So you were young at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I was just 10, 12,
12
years old.
yeah.
Going around
So I always thought you had the best cabbages around, absolutely. And when you come and leave some, it was a great joy for me. Cabbages and you had carrots, beets, onions, terrific onions. Yeah. So you really grew this garden all the time you were in Colebrook?
No, the first year or two I did.
You didn't. How did you happen to get that particular garden plot? Was that because of Mrs. Noyes?
Noyes, yeah.
Her relatives were
Her
over there.
brother owned the farm up there.
So he let you have the space. Yeah.
And he wasn't too happy about it because he raised vegetables to sell too.
Uh-oh.
We were in competition.
Competitors. Okay, and then the very last thing I wanted to ask you about was the Granite Stage Challenge program, which you really started at the high school. Can you tell me what year you started that? I know there was a group of kids that went quite a ways in 87. They graduated in 87.
Yeah.
So that 86, 87, did you do it before then? Oh, you worked with them before that, didn't you?
Yeah, I worked with what? 4 or 5 or 6, 4 classes, I guess.
I can't remember.
Right? Because it came every other year.
That's right. What? Go ahead.
First one there we had the John Doe girl in it. Not the John Doe girl, but the mother was John Doe. Holly.
I didn't think Holly was involved in it, was she?
Yeah, she was in the first group, I think.
Oh, she was. How about the group that included John Frizzell and...
Holly,
No, I know who you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't think of her last name at the moment. But the group I was thinking of was the group that went to the semifinals in 1987, I think.
Yeah.
And that was Katie Byron, Amy Sampson, John Frizzell. It must have been Holly. That was Holly, would have been the fourth one.
Yeah.
So that was the first group that you worked with.
That was the first group.
Yeah, they were a good group.
They were good.
On the whole, yeah, and they went quite a ways. Then they did get to the semifinals, didn't they?
Yes, they got to the semifinals.
Now, what about the next group?
I think we went 3 tiers. I think we went 3 tiers, and we never lost in the first 2 rounds.
No, that's right.
And then this last group was the most promising group of all, probably.
Now, was that the one that included Randy Gilbert?
Randy Gilbert and
who else?
And the Keyser girl,
Jenny Keyser.
And Matt Morello.
Okay.
And Andy
Clark. That was better than the first group, in other words.
Well, I don't want to say what.
No, but maybe they were quicker on the buzzer or quicker.
They were quicker on the. They were, I think, more conscientious. They were the hardest working group, so they all have been hard working.
Yes, yeah.
The groups over there the last 2 years, I went over occasionally, and they fool around. I hadn't wanted to go over now, bother them, because they don't pay attention. You ask them to know something, they won't bother to look it up. Yeah. And they, sort of joke and fool around. These kids that I had were very conscientious about looking things up and working.
They were, yes. Yeah. And were those 2 groups were it then? Because you had 2-year spans between the teams, didn't you? So it was mainly those 2 groups.
Well, those 2 seemed to be the best groups, so the other groups in between, we had pretty hard to judge in there. But the last group seemed to be, I think, had the most wide idea of knowledge. But we got sort of gypped on that last group. That ran into the problem where Randy Gilbert had always been a high scorer, and he had to go play a soccer game, and then be rushed down, and half an hour later go through this, and he was he played the whole soccer game, and he was not exactly in his top shape.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything much at all. I think he had only 2 sections right out of the whole program.
Now, that was the last group that you worked with towards the challenge. So it was 2 groups, really.
4 groups in all. The first group, and then the 2 groups in the middle.
Okay.
We went, I think, the third. Last time the third round. We had a group. The group before that was a group that lost to Hanover. I think we were in the 3rd tier then when we lost to Hanover.
So that would have been 3 teams that got to the 3rd tier?
Well, no, the 4th tier is the quarterfinals.
No, I know that, but I mean, how many teams in all? You had 2 teams that I'm sure of. Was there another team that went as far as the 3rd round?
Yeah, I think both the other 2 did.
And you don't remember who was in the other 2 teams?
Whoa, then perhaps I'm not thinking the worst, maybe it was the best. I remember we had those kids we had a pair of brothers. I can't remember their name. We had a pair of brothers.
I can't.
And one brother had a different name than the other. The mother had married twice, and they carried a different name.
Oh, I know what you're trying to say.
The kids had the same names. I mean, she had named a kid like Ronald with one husband, and then
Ronald was another Ronald.
Ronald too.
I think I know what you're trying to say, but I can't think of the last names either.
They were sort of more. I think probably the 2 more difficult kids to get them to
do anything. Yeah.
And you have kids that appear very, like this Clark boy.
Mm-hmm.
Very
conscientious,
and when we have our little rehearsals here, he do beautifully. But down at the contest, he was
nerves probably.
Yeah.
So actually, then you had 4 separate teams, and it was the first and the last that went 3 rounds.
That went, into the last round.
Yeah.
No, the last team didn't. The last team only went into the 3rd round.
Went into the. No, I'm not talking about the last round. I mean, the 87 group went 3 rounds. And the very last one went 3
rounds. I think the semifinals were the 4th round. I think.
Oh, I thought they were just the 3rd round.
Let's see. You had 32 teams to start with. You were down to 16 in the 2nd round. You were down to 8 in the 3rd round. Yeah, it would be the 4th round. So
they did go 4 rounds. The first and the last one went 4 rounds.
No, the last only went
3 rounds, but the first one went 4.
The last one was lost out in the 3rd round to the team who was going to win the state.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a close game. We had Randy, but
on all 4s.
That's not exactly fortunate, but I mean, if we had been going on all 4s, plus we ran into that other problem. You remember that the announcer got tangled up and couldn't pronounce the last word, and so we lost 20 points on that. He apologized. That didn't happen much.
No, that's true.
You had a minute to give 10 answers.
Oh, yes.
The last question he got tangled up in. And
you lost. The team lost,
We lost because we would have had that point plus 10 for having everyone right.
So then, just to repeat it again, not to be too boring, the first team, the kids who graduated in 87, went into the 4th round.
Yeah.
And the others went through 3 rounds.
3 rounds, and then I think all the others went 3 rounds. This last team didn't get into the quarterfinals. The way we did it, since we lost to the team that won the whole state. Yeah.
Do you know where they placed now? Were they involved this year at the high school?
They lost the 1st round this year.
They've lost the 1st round.
Well, last year. They're not in it this year.
They're not in it this year. They've lost the 1st round last year. Okay.
They don't take it seriously.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I think there's a general tendency when I substitute on that kids don't take things as seriously.
No, I noticed that when they come into the library too.
But I will say positively that over there now, I think they're behaving very well. The attitude of the school seems very good. The kids seem polite.
It's stricter. I think this man is stricter.
Yeah, this man is stricter.
Yeah.
And these last 2 years, I've noticed the atmosphere of the school is very good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure how deep the scholarship goes, but I mean, they don't seem to work very hard to study, but their attitude
is better. Mm-hmm.
And the school is nice and quiet and well behaved.
That's good to hear. Yeah. Now, I just wanted to say the very last thing was you've worked with a score of kids in the years that you've been here in Colebrook. Did you ever regret the fact that you didn't have your own family to work with? Because you gave, in not having your own family, you gave so much more to everybody else's children. I mean, we always said that. But no regrets. I mean, yeah.
Problem. I'm worrying what your own kid would turn out to be.
That's true. No worries about how much college was going to cost and so on and so forth. Well, all right. I think we'll wind it up. And I thank you ever so much, and so do all the rest of us that are going to listen to this tape and read the report.